We call this the TEAR process, TEAR. And this is based on cognitive behavioral therapy. It provokes an emotion. And when we feel overwhelmed, we may feel disempowered. We may feel unmotivated. We may feel sort of smaller. It's not really an emotion, but we feel smaller than the challenge, right? And this leads to action. Now, when we're feeling unmotivated, often our action is to not take action, or maybe it's to take the easy action, or maybe it's to procrastinate, or maybe it's to sit on the couch and watch TV, or maybe it's something like just working, but not actually solving the problem. And then it leads to the result, which the result is you're probably not going to get that much done. You're going to feel unfocused.
You are listening to the Beyond the Scoreboard podcast, transforming athletes into leaders on and off the court with host Coach Furtado. Coaches, are you ready to take your passion for coaching and turn it into a full-time career? I know the challenges firsthand, but the Make Money Coaching Sports program helped me take BTG basketball full-time. If you're tired of juggling coaching part-time and want to fully focus on doing what you love, this business accelerator will give you the tools and support to make it happen. Hit the link in the show notes below to learn more and start living your dream. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Scoreboard podcast. We have a great guest for you today. We have guest Lindsey Wilson. Lindsey is a mindset and mental performance coach, best known as the Sports Hypnotist. With a professional basketball career spanning close to a decade, Lindsey has taken her knowledge of the mental game to work with collegiate athletes, professional athletes, from Olympians and players in the NFL and WNBA, all the way to youth athletes. Lindsey, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Justin. I'm so glad to be here. I love your energy. I feel like we should be high-fiving right now.
I know. Hey, that's a big part of my coaching style and philosophy, so I'm glad you can feel it through this virtual world we are connecting in. So diving right into it, before we kind of talk about your career now as a mental performance coach, I always love to kind of give context on why sports, why do you get into mental performance coaching? And so how did basketball have an impact on your life growing up?
Well, first of all, Justin, I love your mission. I was listening to the podcast trailer, and I don't know that you use this word, but this is what I say, and I believe in the transformational power of sports. And I heard you say something along those same lines. And sports is just, it's who I am. It's what I do. It changed my life. I'm just here paying it forward. I see everything through a sports lens. So in my business as a mindset mental performance coach, work with athletes a lot, but I also work with humans. But the humans that I tend to attract are people that also see the world through a sports lens, and people that have found that competing sometimes only with themselves is the way that they show up in the world. And so, yeah, it's pretty hard to sort of divorce my sports experience from who I am as a human, as an entrepreneur, as a mom. I don't even remember your original question, but I got into mental performance coaching. Maybe that's what you asked. I always say people get into it for one of two reasons. Either they were lucky enough to get it when they needed it and it changed their life, or probably more likely they didn't get it when they needed it and they got it later in life and they're like, oh my God, they're sitting sort of kicking themselves, wondering, or they're kind of irritated that no one taught it to them. Luckily, I was in the former, not the latter, but it really was luck. I worked really hard. I had some talent, and I had just turned 16, and the window for getting a college scholarship is short, and once it closes, it's closed. And I was good enough to play at the Division I level, but it just was not happening. And I was in my own head. My parents saw it. I just couldn't quite figure out how to play at the level I was capable of consistently. I was thinking I was shooting when I should have been passing and passing when I should have been shooting, and worried about other people, worried about college scouts, like the whole thing. And I was playing really heavy. And I didn't know what to do about it. So I just kept thinking, which has never gotten anybody anywhere, especially in sports, right? Yeah. And so my mom had a friend she talked to at work, and he knew somebody he'd grown up with that was a mental performance coach. I don't even know if he called himself that. This was 19, I'm going to age myself, like mid 90s.
Okay.
And really what he was a basketball skill coach that had been taught mental performance. And the things that he taught me, first of all, were really simple, and they worked immediately. And so that kind of planted the seed. And it's not that everything was smooth sailing from there, but I went from really struggling to getting Division I scholarship offers pretty quickly. And that was good timing because I'm going into my junior year, signed with Iowa State going into my senior year, and was kind of off to the races. Again, not that things were easy from that point, but I had a skill set and I had this toolbox that I could go back to, and definitely got pushed, when I went to college and then I played professionally and all of those things. And so that toolbox had to keep getting refined. But really my whole career, especially at the collegiate level, I sort of looked around, and I know a lot of your listeners probably resonate with this. I looked around and I was like, everybody's struggling with the same thing. And no one's really talking about it. And no one's really doing anything either. And I just kind of thought, this is so wasteful and so silly. And if we really all believe in the transformational power of sports, the mental piece is the thing that helps make it transformational. And so I looked around, no one was teaching it. This was, again, I graduated from high school in 99. So it was like, college was when I really started thinking, I can do this. And then after college, and I had no formal training in it. I didn't know how to run a business. I knew pretty much nothing except I knew it needed to be taught. And so I started very organically, went out and worked with some teams of coaches that had coached me or I played against and trusted me. And the biggest response I got was with what I felt, which was, why I have not learned this before. These were top Division I programs. Because of my connections, I worked with some top teams pretty early on, and really elite athletes were saying, why did I not learn this before? And I was like, I don't know, because I was lucky enough to learn it too. And that was really the beginning of my whole career.
I appreciate you sharing all of that context. I have a couple of follow-up questions, and so I'm going to have to clarify and come down and ask one at a time instead of asking millions of thoughts that are going in different directions. I feel like, number one, I am really grateful they're having this conversation at this time right now, because we're in the beginning of club basketball. And so BTG is committed to providing a transformational experience for athletes. Like, we use transformational as well. And I really like that you included the mental component as that final piece to really transforming people, right? You talked about transforming people. It's people over athletes, like no matter what sport you coach, basketball, baseball, softball, doesn't matter. So when we're talking about that mental piece, what was those shifts that you made in high school that coach really helped you with?
I think there's a couple things that come to mind. I did learn about positive affirmations and positive self-talk as a tool, right? And with that, actual visualization. So those are tools. The sort of more of a lens with which to see things was the idea that you can be hard on yourself without beating yourself up. And I think that's one of the most fundamental shifts that an athlete can make, because you will not find an athlete at any level of significance that's not hard on themselves. Like, you just won't, right? And so that sort of nothing's ever good enough, I'm going to work harder than other people, first in the gym, last to leave, that mentality really does get you far. But there's a limit. And that limit's different for every person, depending on their sport, depending on who they are, depending on lots of different factors. But they get there at some point. And when they get there, they have to learn a new way of thinking, and they have to I believe, some people do it on their own, but I think it's really helpful to have somebody outside of yourself that says, it's okay. You can actually do this in a way that's kind, and you can push yourself and not hate yourself, for example. And that sounds kind of extreme, except if you've been an athlete, you know that feeling of you missed a shot and you are so mad at yourself, you can hardly see straight. And there's a way to keep that drive without letting it sort of pull you under. Because the problem with that is, one, it's just not sustainable over time. And the higher up you go, the person, you go from being the best on your team to potentially being the worst, or at least not being the best anymore. And the people that can maintain their emotional regulation and their mental focus through the ups and downs are the ones that are the cream rises to the top in those situations. And the difference between being hard on yourself and keeping that belief that you're still good versus letting it pull you under, that sounds like almost insignificant. And yet those are the difference makers between the starting five and the people that are on the bench, because it's so razor thin.
It's so razor thin. As each level you go up, those, your self-belief and your ability to respond to a miss, to a turnover, to a mistake becomes so important. And so as I heard you talk, I kind of honestly went in flashback to when I was a kid and an athlete, when I was training outside. I would get so frustrated and angry if I didn't shoot the percentage that I wanted. Like, I was so hard on myself, and I had unproductive self-talk. Let's just keep it at that. It probably wouldn't be appropriate for this podcast, what I was saying.
Yeah.
Now, for us coaches, right, how do we help our athletes in a way that is sustainable for us to basically check in with them consistently on their mental, emotional regulation?
It's a really good question. It's, I think the way that I tend to teach really any mental performance is like, done is better than perfect, right? And we really need to find ways to implement mental performance training without expensive mental performance coaches, without hours and hours of classroom time. And so making sure that we're getting things in that fit in the flow of practice. So one thing we teach is something called the reset ritual. You can also call it a mistake ritual, but having something to go to that athletes can really latch onto in those moments and get really comfortable with managing their thoughts. And really what we're doing is managing their emotional reaction. Teaching that, it's super easy to teach, and then practicing it. Everybody wants the magic sauce. Like, what do I say when little Johnny or little Susie misses the shot in the fourth quarter? Well, it's not really about what you say. It's about them having practiced ahead of time to know what to do in those moments, because they need an anchor. They need a lifeline that is familiar, and they need a routine. And so that would be one thing that's really simple. A lot of athletes really benefit from a reset or mistake ritual. So that's in game. I really do when I'm working with a team, we teach something called the athlete toolbox, and it's before competition, during competition, and post competition. Actually, sorry, pre-practice, pre-game, in-game, and post-game. So I'll just go through those real quick. We just talked about in-game mistake rituals. Pre-practice, we teach something called the Braver. But really what we're talking about, and the Braver is nice because it implements a lot of different things in one 5-minute routine. It's an acronym. It's breathing, a reset word, which they then use in their mistake ritual, an affirmation, which triggers a visualization, and them really being able to release when they're doing their breathing. I mean, you mentioned you're doing breathing now. That's awesome. So any kind of breathing or visualization that you can do pre-practice, a lot of this really is the same way that we teach skills. It's reps. Like, there's not some new fancy mental performance training that's going to solve all your problems. It's not rocket science. It's the consistency of very simple tools. Because here's the thing with simple tools. Not only if you get the right ones do they work, but they'll actually be done. And so that's really important, right? Because, do crazy things that never actually get done. And so they're not going to help, right? So a pre-practice routine to get people focused, just and with everybody doing it together takes 5 minutes. You could even do it shorter if you wanted to. That's a really good way to prioritize mental training, to get people bought in, for the athletes to see that you care about it. There's just so many ancillary benefits to it as well. That we're all doing this together. Everybody struggles with the mental side. This is a priority. Like, all of those messages I think are really important, because what that also does is it creates this culture of like, hey, what we're doing is hard, man. Like, there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. You're going to fail. I'm going to fail. And it creates this culture of like, this is the game.
Right.
And by the way, as a coach, I'm doing it too. I'm doing it in life. I'm struggling with things. So in that pre-practice, the more you can talk about failure, the more you can talk about struggles, the more you can kind of bring the ups and downs like to the real world and talk to them about it, I think is really important. So that's pre-practice. Pre-game is a lot of like teaching them emotional regulation. Really simple trick. We teach something that's a little more complicated to teach like in a podcast, but it's essentially helping them learn that they have an ideal we call it a hyped up meter, but they have an ideal like mental state.
Activation.
Yeah. What they need to be in every single game. So what a lot of athletes do is they regulate themselves based on the opponent. So if they're playing, when in college, we're playing, I don't know, Oklahoma on TV. Well, you better believe I'm going to be ramped up. But if we're playing Podunk University in our preseason tournament, we're supposed to win by 40. I'm going to have a different mentality. And that's not how it should be. Or they wait until the first couple minutes of the game to see if they're good at basketball that day, right? The first couple shots go in. I'm an All-American. They don't go in. I'm the worst player in the world. So we're letting all these external things influence our mental state. The other thing that a lot of athletes, and this is going to sound, maybe for adults, it sounds, I don't know, too simplistic, but in my experience, the simple stuff is the stuff that actually works. And it's this. A lot of athletes think of being nervous, quote unquote nervous, and the physiological fight or flight reaction that happens before games as a bad thing. And so some of them will overcompensate for that and say, I'm just not going to care. I'm going to joke around. I don't want to get nervous. So I'm just going to talk to my teammates, and they spend no time getting focused because they're really scared of getting butterflies. And reframing that into excitement and helping them understand that nervousness and excitement are the exact same physiological response. But our perception of one being good and one being bad is very skewed, especially for young people. And I would ask in the sense of like, when you have played your best games, and I can even ask you, Justin, when you played your best games, did you have a physiological response ahead of time?
When I played my best games is when I wasn't thinking, like I was just being.
But before, did you feel any sort of like butterflies in your stomach?
Of course, always. Yeah, okay. Always. Like
and that's
my best
what most
games.
Players, yeah. And so
exactly.
Most players will not say, yeah, I played my best game. I just rolled into the gym and I was, not that you can't be relaxed. I don't mean that, but like they don't usually just like roll out of bed and play their best game.
No.
Right? And so in a sense, it's like teaching young people that their body is doing what it's supposed to be doing to get you ready to play your best. So essentially what we're saying is nervousness versus excitement. The language actually matters, right? Like if you say, I'm excited to play today versus I'm nervous, like nervousness is like the sense of being small and scared, whereas excitement is like moving towards it. And the semantics in this case really affect how we interpret our body's same physiological reaction. So we teach that. Then we teach, like I said, the in-game mistake ritual, and then post-competition or post-game. So I just taught this a couple months ago to an SEC team. And I think it's really, and I tell you that because it's not just, it's a really simple exercise. And it's not just for like, I don't know, little kids or high school kids. Like it's something that I teach my students to do after like presentations or sales calls. And essentially it's a post something evaluation. And you're just going to ask three things. You're going to say, what went well? What didn't go well? And what can I do better next time? And this is like gold. And it's gold for a couple of reasons. Not only are we getting really great information, but we're practicing exactly what we talked about in the beginning, which is we can still have high standards. We can still be hard on ourselves. We can still be driven individuals because you're not going to get to any level without being that person. But we can do it in a sense of moving forward through failure, through the messiness of learning and getting better. And we can do it in a way that still contains self-love. And we teach that by doing something called critiquing versus criticizing. So we try to teach athletes to really step back and get in the habit of just, it's almost like it's not you that's observing. You know, you're like, I did this great. No, not really any emotion with it. It's not a reflection of you as a human for the things you didn't go well. And then it's like moving forward, what can I do better next time? It's very like matter of fact. So that exercise really helps athletes that are like ridiculously hard on themselves exercise that muscle of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater and saying, well, I'm just not going to look at myself. Because that's what I did in college. I was like, I mean, I did it actually because I was so driven. I just made myself do it. But like the thought of going into my coach's office and watching film was like my idea of like hell, because I would watch it and I would be so ridiculously hard on myself. I couldn't just take the information and use it. I had to beat myself up. And that's what we're trying to get away from. Because again, if we do that, we just stop doing it. We just put our head in the sand. And if we win, we're happy. If we don't win, we're not happy. But we're not actually getting anything out of it. We're not looking at it and saying, what can I learn from this? And so when we exercise that muscle, again, it's great information, really great information, but it's also the repetition of, can I look at my performance in a way that doesn't have me on these like roller coaster extremes? Because again, a lot of athletes do that. They play well, they win, they played a lot, they feel good. The opposite happens. They rode the bench, they didn't win, they didn't play well, they missed a shot, they feel terrible. And neither one of those is actually all that helpful if you're talking about improving. So again, it's pre-practice, pre-game, in-game, and post-game.
That makes a lot of sense. And you just dropped a ton of wisdom. So I'm kind of going to highlight it. So when we're talking about the pre-practice is really that opportunity to use the breath, the reset word, the affirmation, the visualization. That's all opportunities. Like if we're going to get better at our mental performance skills, it's practice just like a jump shot, right? So we're doing that over and over and over again. Pre-game, it's about having them, helping them with their physiology and making sure that, hey, we're going to turn our nerves into excitement. And like, it's the same thing. Like when we're getting on here on the podcast, I used to get really nervous, right?
Yeah.
When I was just really excited about like when I was like really starting out and I really didn't know what I was talking about. And I had some guests where I'm like, you're way more accomplished than me. I don't know why you're on this show, but you know, But so I was just really excited. Right. Same thing shows up. And then the game, the mistake, you know, the reset, what he's got, the reset routine. I like the double R's, and then post game always being reflective. Like all of that you can kind of include like within 5 to 10 minutes of
totally.
You know, your practice, games, pre-game, all that good stuff.
Yeah. And if you want the shortcut, we sell the Braver pre-practice routine on our website. I want to say it's like $40. And we also sell something called the mistake ritual, which I think is also, might even be cheaper than that. Anyway, so you can get all that and just plug in our system, or like I said, you can do your own. But yeah, that's the whole thing, is like none of them, sometimes they take a little bit of time to teach, but once they're taught, they don't take a lot of time. And in fact, they're really baked into what you're already doing. Like the reset ritual, it works in games because you use it in practice. Water breaks, in between drills, someone gets pulled out of a drill, warm-ups, you know, like any time you can think of breaks. I mean, basketball has natural breaks, free throws, like you can get them in timeouts, obviously, like you can get these reset rituals, the reps, even in practice, in a really easy way. So like you're just getting your, you know, you're in between drills. You're like, all right, guys, it's water break, reset ritual, you know, or have even better, have one of your captains do it. Right. You know, and they're like 3, 2, 1, and everybody takes their breath and does their ritual. Ugh, I can't say it either. And so then you got to rep, you know, an athlete gets pulled out of a drill, coach talks to him like, okay, do your reset ritual before you get back in. You know, there's just little ways to get to, you're really trying to sprinkle these things in a way that's really easy on you too. I mean, I think that's the challenge, I think, in the past with mental performance coaching is you either had to have someone like me that frankly is expensive or maybe even unavailable. I mean, now it's a little bit different with Zoom, but like you maybe don't have one, or you don't have someone you have a relationship with, and or you really don't do it at all. Because I mean, coaches have so much on their plate. A lot of them get for good reason, and they also have lives, most of them. And it's like, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this other thing too. It's like, where do I even start? And they get overwhelmed, and either they throw their hands up and they say, oh, I'm going to do it next year. And I think we need to make it as easy as possible for coaches, because coaches are doing so much already. And that's really my mission, is like, coaches got enough on their plate. I mean, I'm coaching a 9-year-old team, and it's a lot for me. Like, you know, and I don't even prepare for practice because all I need to do is like layup drills, you know, it's like, and so you're talking about a coach that like is doing all the things in life and then shows up to practice and has so many things to teach. And then we're expecting him to do one more thing. That one more thing better be simple, easy, not take a lot of time. They don't have the time to do all the research to figure out what works. We have something called the mental game plan, which is a 6-part system, which includes what I just talked about, which we call the athlete toolbox. We have a 6-part system that we teach. And the whole goal is like, I've spent 20 years distilling and curating all this mental performance stuff into a simple system. And it's really taken me that long, which sounds crazy, but it's just, there's a lot out there. And if you want a proven system, it will just save you time, because really, who has the time to Google all this stuff and figure it out?
Takes a long time.
It does.
So I really like that you're tying it into the coaches, because that was my next kind of question. Is actually, I feel like as coaches, we should be using all of this. Like, I've been using all of this as a business owner and as a coach now, like talking about visualizations and affirmations. So for me, right, like this is my first time, like my program significantly expanded, and like I'm like, and now I'm a boss, right? I have coaches under me, and it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm so overwhelmed, right? If I like, that's one label I can have, or like I'm excited and I've been using my breath all week, and that's really helped me just get on the phone and talk to my coaches and talk to the parents about enrolling them into the program, because the program's not cheap, right? I have a lot of expenses, and it's a highly valuable program. And so kind of just reframing, and I use a lot of the mental tools that help me with that reframing. So I'm curious how you use those mental tools in your own life as a mental performance coach and a business owner and a mom.
Yeah. I mean, I always joke that I use more mental performance training in a single day as a mom than I ever did as an athlete. And it's not really an exaggeration, because it's very similar, the ups and downs of parenting, especially small children. I have four daughters under 9. So the amount of things coming at you, it's actually very similar to athletics. And you're constantly kind of getting thrown off, and there's ups and downs, and there's successes and there's failures. And in real time, you have to adjust yourself. And you have to maintain sort of your core center. So it's funny that you use the word overwhelm, because one of the simplest things I teach my adult student, people that are in my certification, which they're learning how to become mental performance coaches. And one of the things that we teach is we have to practice what we preach. So if we're talking about managing our mind as athletes, we're doing it as humans, as entrepreneurs, similar to what you're saying. And so one of the simplest examples I can give is really any adult has had the experience of feeling overwhelmed. Now, this is a thought. It is not a fact. However, your brain convinces you that it is a fact. Okay? That's not to say that there's not many things to do, but being overwhelmed, I feel overwhelmed, or I am overwhelmed, is a thought. Now, that thought is a choice. Doesn't feel like a choice, but it is. And when we have that thought, it evokes an emotion. We call this the TEAR process, TEAR. And this is based on cognitive behavioral therapy. It provokes an emotion. And when we feel overwhelmed, we may feel disempowered. We may feel unmotivated. We may feel sort of smaller. It's not really an emotion, but we feel smaller than the challenge, right? And this leads to action. Now, when we're feeling unmotivated, often our action is to not take action, or maybe it's to take the easy action, or maybe it's to procrastinate, or maybe it's to sit on the couch and watch TV, or maybe it's something like just working but not actually solving the problem. And then it leads to the result, which the result is you're probably not going to get that much done. You're going to feel unfocused. I mean, everybody's had that experience, or maybe it's just me. I shouldn't say that. Most people have had the experience, I think, of feeling overwhelmed, being really unfocused, working, maybe even a whole day, and at the end of the day, not feeling like you got anything done, right? What we have to understand about our brain is that our brain is so powerful that once we believe something is true, we go out and we work to make it happen. So the interesting thing about the TEAR process is we have the thought, we have the emotion, we have the action, we have the result. We are working in the background, or overtly or covertly, to make that result reinforce our original thought. So we actually want the results to prove that we're right. I'm overwhelmed. I have too much to do. I can't do this much. And we work to make that happen. So the result reinforces our original thought. Now, well, as I said earlier, we can switch the thought because it's not actually a fact. The fact might be something like, I have 10 things to do. That might be a fact. But the thought of I'm overwhelmed is a result, is a thought. Okay. So I have 10 things to do. Fact. The thought I could have, and this is exactly the thought I teach my students because I've used it for years and it's so powerful. Are you ready for it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. The thought is, I have just enough time to do the things that are important to me. Okay.
Let's say it again.
Yeah. I have just enough time to do the things that are important to me. This is not discounting the 10 things. This is not putting our head in the sand. This is not toxic positivity. This is putting a thought in our head, choosing to have a thought that is actually going to get us a result. Okay. So the thought is, I have just enough time to do things that are important to me. The emotion is now potentially motivated, inspired, empowered versus what we had before. Okay. That emotion is going to lead to different actions. And it might look something like, okay, I said the things that are important to me. So what's actually important to me? Well, these 5 things this actually does not need to get done. Which, by the way, if we're choosing to be overwhelmed, our brain doesn't even see that, right? Are there 5 things that don't actually need to get done or don't need to get done by you or don't need to get done today? Probably. So it forces you to like pare down your list maybe, or it helps you prioritize the things that need to get done first. So then you're getting momentum and the result is you actually get something done. So you finish your workday and it's reinforcing the idea that you have just enough time to get done the things that are important to you. And so that's what we call in my world, my community of coaches, we call that a high vibe cycle. Because then you're getting momentum. And when you get momentum, you get more done. When you're in the low vibe cycle, you self-sabotage, you procrastinate, and you work to keep yourself in this loop that is reinforcing your thought. What we don't often do is recognize the choice that we have to switch our thoughts. And that's kind of the basis of everything that I do, is the choice to consciously think thoughts that are important to us, thoughts that benefit us. It's basically intentional thought creation.
That's really powerful. And I will share a story that connects exactly what you're talking about. Because like I had mentioned, I had been feeling overwhelmed. And I think it was either last Wednesday or Thursday. I just kind of had a realization and just recognized. And I started to just be like, I'm grateful for this challenge to level up my leadership.
There you go.
I didn't use the exact, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was just like, okay,
yep.
What's a priority? What needs to be done today? Like the podcast has not been getting as much love recently because it hasn't been as high of a priority. It's still a priority enough for me to get it done. Do I post as much about it as I would like? No, because unfortunately it's not in the highest priority. So for me, like, I just like recognize, like, I feel like using that language, like you were talking about, is a lot more empowering to be grateful for the challenge, to like, I am a great leader who can set boundaries. Like that's been one of my biggest areas of growth is, I'm reading this book right now, 10 to 25, The Science of Motivating Young People.
Love that.
He's talking about the mentor mindset. And so it's kind of like there's a protector and an enforcer. So the enforcer has high standards, no support. Protector, high support, no standards. And like we want to be somewhere in the middle with high support, high standards. So like for me, I'm kind of in the protector. Like I love all my athletes. They know that. But then sometimes I'll lower the standards because I'm like, I want them to like me, right?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So I'm kind of like trying to shift myself into the middle. And I'm using these affirmations, like I set boundaries with my athletes because I'm young. Sometimes they think I'm their friend, and I'm not their friend. I'm their coach. So
love that.
I'm trying to put all this into action, and I'm glad you're kind of giving me verbiage that I can, obviously connect it to myself, but then also teach it to my athletes.
Well, here's the thing, Justin. I love that you brought that up because what I have found in my work with athletes and like former athletes and coaches is a lot of the tools that I teach are, I don't want to say innate to some of us, but like they are things that maybe we figured out. Maybe it was through trial and error, or maybe more likely it's things that we've done we didn't know we were doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, how can you teach it? right? Like, right. A lot of people are like, oh, be more mentally tough. And like, they're like, I'm mentally tough. And it's like, but how are you mentally tough? Because you can't teach it unless you know. So I think and you'll know that it's good tools, in my opinion, when you're like, that feels like truth. Like, I've done that. And I think that sometimes counterintuitive. It's not the tool that you're like, oh, I never thought about it. Like, that is something totally brand new. I've never heard of anything like that. Those aren't the tools that usually stick, in my opinion. They're the ones that you're like, I knew that, but I didn't necessarily know that I knew that. Or that has been true in my life. And now there's words to it. Or now there's a system to it. And so I love that you say that, because I do think those are the tools that are the most, those are the ones that are going to stick. And I also think that's something we teach our coaches is like, you're going to learn the tools and like, you're going to make them your own. Like, that's right. The art of coaching, right? Is like, You have this story and this resonates with you. And, you really like breathing and you like visualization. It's like, that's going to be your secret sauce. Like, we have the structure, and we are very, I don't want to say set on the structure, but like, we have a tested, proven system. And I think people should rely on a tested, proven system because it takes so long to come up with your own. That being said, it's not regurgitating what other people have taught. You are making it your own. You're bringing in your life experience and your voice and your rapport and relationship with your athletes to make it something new. And frankly, to make it something that I could never teach, And so I think that's like the magic of it is like, get the curriculum or the toolbox from us or somebody else, because it's going to make your life so much easier. And then you're bringing in you. And I think you're going to feel better about it too, that it's, that it's something that is unique in the world.
Absolutely. And then it's another way to connect, because every athlete, like we're doing, like as a part of our club program, we have like group BTG agreements, and each team, right, from our 12U boys to like our JV girls to our college prep boys, they're all going to have similar agreements, but they're going to be a little bit different because each athlete in that room is going to have a little bit of a different goal. So all that experience is unique. And I say all that to say, like, I think, kind of transitioning, and I feel like we've only been talking for 10 minutes. I don't know how it's almost 40. Anyways, I want to give you an opportunity to share to the coaches that are listening, and maybe even the parents too. How did you become a mental performance coach? Like, and how did you start your own business? Because I think a lot of times, I'm kind of getting to the point where like people are starting to ask me a little bit, because like, I'm not like 10 years in, but I'm like 3 years in. So I'm a couple years in. And I know the mental performance space it's a little different than what I'm doing. So I'd love for you to share a little bit.
Yeah. So I started a mental performance mindset coach certification about 8 years ago. And the reason that I did is, there's many years where I was so early in this arena, that there was a lot of me explaining what mental performance even was. Right. And then the tide started shifting, like professional athletes were talking about the mental game. Like, we collectively started like getting that this is important, even though it was important all along. And then of course, COVID happened. And like, now it's like the cat's out of the bag, right? Everybody knows that this is important, but still we don't have curriculums. We don't have widespread mental performance coaching. I mean, you think about something like a dynamic warm up or even strength and conditioning. Everybody has access to it. Even if you don't, you can do body weight stuff. And even if you don't have money, like you can YouTube how to do a dynamic warm up. Like, it's everywhere, right? And for good reason, because it's such an important thing to warm up correctly, to do weightlifting. Like, everybody knows the importance of that. It's accessible to everybody. We're not there with mental performance training. It started with people starting to get aware, but we're not where we're reaching everybody. And so essentially, I've been passionate about this really since I got it. And then, like I said, in my whole career, I kind of looked around and was like, this is so stupid that nobody's teaching this.
Right.
So I started teaching it. But then I got to the level where I was like, there needs to be more of us. And typically people always thought, well, I have to go get my sports psychology master's degree or my PhD. And I thought that too for a little while, but I was playing overseas. There wasn't any online courses. And so by the time I retired, I was 30 years old and I already had a successful business. So I was like, okay, so I just need to keep learning about the business side, which I'm not going to learn in school anyway. So Yeah. So I was like, okay, then I'm going to do this. And so I did that for a couple of years, just myself being a coach. And then I was like, there needs to be more of us. And the other thing that I think is important is I felt like the collective consciousness was enough that there was space for other coaches. Like I was teaching people how to make money and it was possible for them to make money. Right. And so all those things kind of came together and it's been like explosion in this space the last few years. However, people are always like, well, is it too late or is there too many people in space? And I'm like, go down to your local college or high school team or middle, like, do they have a mental performance coach? Probably not. Or you go to, I don't know, kids playing baseball or a club baseball program. Like they might, but there's going to be a lot of them that don't. And even if they have one for the whole club, every individual athlete probably needs it too. And so they all have, no, there's plenty of space for this. And so the last few years, we've had a lot of parents come through our certification. And again, we have what I talked about earlier. We have something called the mental game plan, which is our 6-part mental performance curriculum. And that includes the athlete toolbox, all those things that I already taught. And then we have our certification. And our certification is a 4-month, really soup to nuts. The goal at the end of the certification is for you to get your first paid client. So this is definitely people that want to start a business. We've had a lot of parents come through. We've had therapists come through. We've had tons of coaches come through. We've had people that already have their own businesses, but just haven't figured out how to position it right. We have people like yourself that are like doing skill or regular coaching. They have their own business, doing a soccer skill academy, but they want to add in the mental performance component. And some of them are already sort of doing it, but they don't know how to package it. But many come in and they have a passion for this. They probably have a sports background. They probably have access. They're already, like you said, the influencer of athletes in some way or another. And they're like, could I do this? I'm seeing the need. Could I be the one that provides this? And so we have a 4-month certification program that we take people through that, again, soup to nuts, really teaches you how to start your own mental performance coaching business. And I just, I think I get some hate on the internet because I think you don't have to go back to school to do this and you don't have to go back to school to do this really, really, really well. I think the focus should be on helping kids and being really good at coaching. That's important, right? But I don't think the academic route is the way for most people. For some people, certainly it is. At least it's not the only option.
No, that's huge. And I had that big realization this year is like, I can only make an impact on so many athletes. Like I'm just one person. Like long term, I know that I'm going to eventually kind of use this podcast as an opportunity to get into coaching coaches. I know that's what I want to do. And I know that's how I can impact more athletes, because if I help train the next generation of coaches to do like a lot of different evidence-based coaching, include the mental performance side of things. And like, I'm really learning so much about the science behind like yelling at kids and like, like giving confidence. Like a lot of players want to play for me because they play, like I let my players like play free, give them structures, principles of play. Yeah. And then like, you're not getting yelled at or cussed out at after every mistake. Do I teach and correct and use what do you use? You didn't use criticism, as critiquing, using critiquing athletes to get better. So while I still have you, kind of the last question I'll ask for you is, what are kind of your thoughts on how I can implement it into BTG basketball through our club program, and then even, sprinkle it into our camps and clinics?
Yeah. I think if you're interested in the business side, it would be the certification, but I think that might not be like what you're looking for. You're looking for more like mental performance tools, in which case it probably would be the mental game plan. I mean, I talked about the athlete toolbox, and I think that framework is really good because even if you don't want to spend money or the time of doing a certification, you can really see like, okay, can I do this pre-practice? Can I do this pre-game? Can I do this in competition and post-competition? That athlete toolbox is really, it's like just like a really simple, low stakes, low investment way to start this stuff. So I think that's like one thing that's just really important. Yeah. So I don't know when we're going to be opening up the mental game plan again. And I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but if any of your listeners are interested in the certification, we are opening that March 12th. So I don't know when this podcast is coming out.
Coming out very soon.
Okay, cool. So March 12th, we have a webinar on how to launch your mental performance career in 2025. And we break it down basically. We break down like where you're going to get clients, who you're going to work with. We also have a free ebook called How to Become a Mental Performance Coach Without Your Sports Psych Degree. So I can give you the link for that for your show notes. Those are our two things. Like start a business as a mental performance coach. We can teach you how to do that. Don't want to do a business or not sure if you want to do business. Again, that's not open right now, but we have something called the mental game plan. And that's really for coaches that aren't necessarily interested in the business or not interested in the business yet, or maybe aren't sure if they want to do the business, but want to start with their team. And that's like a plug and play curriculum that you can teach your athletes. And again, I think the thing that distinguishes us, me and my company, is like, we really want simple, actionable, doable, realistic tools. I think the vast world, people come to us so often because they're like drowning in information. They're listening to the podcast. They got the whole thing of books, which I do too. But, it's like they're learning, they're consuming all this stuff. And it's like, what do you do on a Tuesday afternoon at practice? That's really the question. Like, what do I do? And what do I do the next Tuesday without, trying to come up with new things all the time? And I think that's where we're going to get the most momentum. Everybody thinks their problems are so unique. They're not unique. All athletes have probably the 5 same, there's some nuance, but they're probably going to have like the same main 5 problems. They need to learn this baseline information. It's a little bit like back to sort of the weightlifting curriculum. It's like, sure, do people have certain things that they need to do in the weight room? Yeah, but we're not going to get to any of that until they can squat properly and safely. And maybe even with a lightweight, right? And get the form down and like all those things. And like, yeah, maybe later we're going to be doing plyometrics and Olympic lifts and all the fancy stuff. But like teach the basics first. And the basics should be easy, simple, doable. And the thing also with that is like when coaches get the momentum and the confidence to teach it themselves, they do that by teaching the same things over and over again. They don't do it by trying every single tool in the mental performance arena that has ever been invented, not knowing what's working, throwing spaghetti at the wall, getting frustrated. That's not how you do it. You teach, again, that's mental game plan. We have six steps. Once you teach those over and over again, you're like, oh, okay, this is not rocket science.
Right. It becomes just like coaching basketball or any other sport. So I really appreciate how simple you make all of this and how accessible you're making this as well. I believe like accessibility is one of the most important parts of sports. And I feel like that's a movement I want to be a part of with Beyond the Game and Beyond the Scoreboard, because like even I know like the club basketball costs, like, and I can even only say to mine, it's high, like, and not everyone can afford it. And so I eventually one day I would like to be a little bit more of a European model where the NBA and some of these bigger organizations are involved to make this more accessible for all youth. That's a bigger conversation than we're having right now. So with that being said, where can people find you and, on social media, and how can they connect with you? And you did a great job explaining some of the other
Well, first of all, I totally agree with you. I am so about our coaches learning how to make money if they want to have a business, because I think once you can make money, you're taking yourself seriously and you get to another level of professionalism. But that being said, I am with you. I literally just talked to my team the other day, and I was like, the question that I'm asking myself in 2025 is if mental performance training is just for rich white kids, right? Because that's not okay. And it's a hard question to answer, but I do think asking the question is really important. So I just wanted to get that in there because it's something that I'm thinking about. Like we might do some scholarship things, and anyway.
No, I'm having the same thing. I'm having the same thing.
It's hard because we have businesses too, it's like, and if you don't have a business, you don't get to do this. That's the bottom line too.
That was part of my realization that I didn't really talk about, was like, because if I don't charge what I'm charging, I'm not going to be a business.
You got a day job, and then you don't have the bandwidth to even do it that well. That's the So I'm with you, but I also don't think that it's either or. I think once you learn how to make money, it takes you to another echelon, which allows you to do some of these other things. So I'm with you on that. Let's see. I'm on Instagram mostly at Lindsey Positive Perform. My website is positiveperformancetraining.com, and everything I talked about is on there. The mistake ritual, the braver, all our free stuff, our webinars on there. So that would be the place to find me. Oh, and I have my own podcast.
Perfect.
The Mindset Coach Academy podcast, where I talk about how to practice what we preach. We call it Live It, how to coach this stuff, and how to sell it.
Cool. I love it. Thank you so much for your time today, Lindsey. We'll definitely have to check out the podcast. We'll include all of this in the show notes, everyone. And until next time.
Thanks, Justin, so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.